I'm Pat Morrison, and welcome back to the Los Angeles Times coverage of the repercussions of the decision from the Supreme Court today overturning a 50-year precedent, a right to legal abortion for women in the United States of America. As we've already been hearing throughout the course of the day, states that oppose abortion are reinforcing their laws, looking about how to enforce and criminalize, in some cases, the ban that they have now imposed. In some cases, already, thanks to trigger legislation, in 9 of the 13 states that had laws in place that would immediately criminalize abortion if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned. And then in states like California, reinforcing the right, a constitutional right in California's case, which may be coming to you on your November ballot, the right to abortion in California, and solidifying links with the states of Oregon and Washington across the Pacific coast to also reinforce the ability for women to get access to abortions. And that's what Erika Smith is writing and talking about with us, about how alliances and allegiances that already existed in an informal way are being solidified among women's health organizations as they try to help women living in states where abortion is now banned to get the services they need in other states. My colleague Erika Smith, columnist at the LA Times. Thank you, Erika.
Thanks, Pat, for having me on.
So Arizona and Colorado California separated only by that river, but by a lot of different political policies and attitudes. And yet you're finding that there's some cross-river cooperation going on.
Yeah, actually, is there even still a river right now? But yeah, there's a lot of cross collaboration. So Planned Parenthood of Arizona pretty much covers the entire state, as the name implies. But here in California, of course, we have lots of different affiliates of Planned Parenthood. But they've been working with Planned Parenthood of the Southwest, which basically covers San Diego County, Riverside County, and Imperial County, which is a huge swath of land. But, today, when Roe fell, the organizations had kind of been working together to see how many patients were already kind of going across state lines to get services from Arizona into California. And they were surprised when they found that hundreds of people were already doing it. And so, seeing what happened in Texas, seeing what was obviously going to come out of the Supreme Court with Roe, they decided to kind of solidify their partnership, which, in preparation really for today. And so the idea is that they would coordinate, and patients that need abortion services that it's going to be in question in Arizona would be able to have seamless transportation to one of the clinics in the Pacific Southwest region, and be able to come back and get post-op or counseling and other things that remain legal in Arizona.
So this is a question of proximity as well as anything else, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because, LA, of course, is going to get thousands of patients looking for services in the next year, according to a number of researchers. But, in Arizona, what they found is a lot of people are willing to drive. They'd rather drive than get on a plane. And the sense is that in LA, we're going to get a lot of air travel where, perhaps further south, people driving in from Tucson, from Phoenix are going to drive across the state line into California and get their services done and then drive back home the next day.
Arizona's anti-abortion law predates Roe. In fact, it goes back to territorial days into the 19th century. Is Arizona still up in the air about how and whether it's going to enforce a ban, or is it pretty much a done deal?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Today's, obviously been chaos for a lot of reasons, but from best I can tell from what's going on in Arizona. So there's a couple things going on. As you mentioned, there is a law from the territorial days, I guess 158 years ago to be exact, that bans abortion in all cases except to protect the life of the mother, and violators are punished with, I think, up to 5 years in prison. But because Arizona legislators, which pretty much the Republicans control the legislature, it's not a supermajority, but they're in charge of the governor's office and both houses of the legislature by a thin majority, they decided to pass another bill, kind of more of a trigger type of thing that would go into effect with Roe a few months ago, earlier this year. And so that bans abortion after 15 weeks and also threatens anybody basically who helps with criminal charges and also the loss of a professional medical license. And so right now the situation seems to be that the courts are kind of having to sort out which ban is going to actually go into effect. It's not so much about, whether there will be a ban, but it'll be which ban and why. And so that's kind of the situation right now. But The uncertainty has caused, apparently, Planned Parenthood of Arizona to already suspend its abortion services as of about a couple of hours ago. It's unclear whether they were sending patients already to California, but they have, for now, stopped offering services and referred people who have appointments to kind of go elsewhere.
It's curious that the wife of Barry Goldwater, the conservative Arizona senator who was the Republican presidential candidate in 1964, she was the head of Planned Parenthood in Arizona for a number of years. So you see politics swing back and forth over time along with culture. Now, is this cross-border Arizona-California cooperative setup looking like it could be a model for other states? For example, New Mexico, close to Texas, and New Mexico having a lot more liberal policies than Texas, so that there could be these kinds of cross-state line partnerships that Planned Parenthood and other service providers could set up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely the intent. I don't think that Arizona is the only state that is looking at this type of partnership. Again, I think after Texas, I think a lot of the Planned Parenthoods, I mean, not that they weren't awake already, but I think it got everybody's attention, and from my reporting, and that they started to talk about, like, looking at states that had trigger laws into effect, or bills that were passing through whatever state legislature that would do such a thing, or laws that have been, like Arizona's territorial law, that have been longstanding on the books and just waiting to be revived. And so they looked at states in ways that where people might go, and also kind of rebuilding that network. And it's kind of interesting, in talking to the CEO of Planned Parenthood Arizona, she talked a lot about how pre-Roe days, the Janes and other people that kind of connected people to services, and how in some ways they're drawing on the past in history and things that worked at the time, and kind of modifying them for today in a way that is more accessible for people. Of course, there's been a lot of talk about using your cell phone, even like text messages, or like using your menstrual cycle app, can cause problems. So I think in some ways we almost might have to go back to what was done pre-Roe, smartphone to an extent. But I do think there is a sense that we want that Planned Parenthood is trying to kind of build this network to help people get the services that they need.
Planned Parenthood has stopped providing abortion services in Arizona, but is it still answering phones and giving women advice and direction, or is that even legally dangerous? Erika, can you hear me? No, I think we may have lost Erika there. Let's see whether we can get Erika. Erika, are you back with us? Can you hear me now? Erika Smith is an LA Times columnist. Her column is going to run in Sunday's paper about this kind of cross-border partnership between Arizona and Southern California and some abortion providers in this state helping out women in need in Arizona. Erika, can you perhaps hear us again? Let's see. Erika, are you back?
I am back.
Okay, there. I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that.
I wasn't sure if I was still live or not, if I should just keep talking.
I'm glad we're still here. My question was whether, obviously they've stopped providing abortion services in Arizona, but are they even in a position to offer guidance, suggestion, advice to women who call them up seeking help?
Oops, I think I lost you again.
Okay. I'm afraid that we may have to wrap that up. Let me see what we're hearing from our tech people here on whether or not we can. Nope, I'm afraid that we've lost her. Well, we can tell you to look for Erika's column in Sunday in the Los Angeles Times, as she's writing about this partnership. Arizona, California is separated by a river. Granted, it may not be much of a river in the drought right now, but a cooperative arrangement with Planned Parenthood and healthcare provider services for women in Arizona to work with providers here in Southern California in order to get women in Arizona the services they want. If either of these bans, a modern ban in Arizona in the wake of Roe versus Wade, or a territorial ban that existed more than 150 years ago, will go into effect in the state of Arizona, and of course then force women to decide whether they would go to New Mexico, where services are still available, or to, Erika is back with us? Yes, Erika?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we were talking about, and I hope we can get this in again, the third time is the charm, whether Planned Parenthood can still offer advice and guidance to women, even if it can't offer abortion services in Arizona right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely the thinking is they do want to offer advice and guidance. And I think they're trying to kind of build those connections with their patients, so they can communicate with them. I mean, part of the idea is if patients do come to California for abortion services, that they would return to Arizona and they would get a lot of their other services, whether it's a post-op, whether it's counseling, whether it's, contraceptive, something else that Planned Parenthood provides that's still legal in Arizona, that they would be able to still connect with their patients in that way. But I do get the sense that Planned Parenthood Arizona is definitely trying to kind of still, give advice to patients and make it kind of as much of a seamless experience as possible.
Earlier today, I talked to our colleague Molly Hennessy-Fisk, who was sitting in a clinic in San Antonio where women were coming in for their appointments and finding, to their shock and grief in some cases, that they were unable to follow through to get the treatment, to get the abortion, whether a medicated abortion or a surgical abortion that they wanted. And some women had come, in one case from Arizona, in another case from a long way away, had taken time off work, had spent money they couldn't very well afford, only to be told that this could no longer happen in the state of Texas. Are you hearing any stories like that, just serendipitously and randomly from anywhere in the country in your inbox?
No, I mean, not yet. I'm sure I've kind of had my head down a little bit working today, but I'm sure that those stories exist. I've heard from some people that are concerned about upcoming appointments or plans that they had made. I haven't heard about anybody today. I mean, I think a lot of people didn't necessarily expect the court to come out with the Roe decision today. There was some speculation that it would be next week. So I do think those things are happening. And again, I think, Planned Parenthood has just suspended its services for the time being. So I'm sure there's a lot of people who had appointments either, next week who are kind of now in limbo. And so, those things are going to happen. A lot of these states where everything is up in the air. And I think it's just the beginning of this messiness that we're going to see with the fallout of Roe.
Excuse me, one of the things that has been happening over the course of the last 50 years is that the preponderance, maybe a majority of the women who have gone to get abortions under Roe have been women of color. And this particularly affects people who are poor, who don't have the kind of mobility and money that that other women may have. This too is one of the consequences that I'm sure that all of us are going to be keeping an eye on into how it affects people, even as it did so profoundly when this was legal and abortion services were scarce and hard to find, how much more difficult it will be now.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I've, heard a lot, definitely from Arizona, from here, talking to providers here in California, Southern California, is that, they serve so many women of color. I mean, in Arizona, it's of course a lot of undocumented women who, don't have a lot of money, don't have a lot of places to turn, and Planned Parenthood ends up being that place. And so they spent a lot of time, before all of this, not only making sure that patients know that they have a right to, reproductive care, but also helping them pay for it. And here it's in California, it's obviously the same thing. It's a lot of Latino women, a lot of Black women, a lot of other women of color, a lot of poor
Indigenous
women in other parts of the state. And so it's going to really, serving that population, is going to be tough. And particularly for people who are concerned that they're going to get in trouble for doing that and what that means. I think that's the other hurdle that I've heard quite a bit about is like not only making sure that those people are reached, but also telling them that they can do this without getting in trouble.
And in
so
trouble,
there's a lot of challenges there.
in trouble can mean legal trouble, but it also can mean trouble at home. If you're underage, how do you explain your absence? If you're in an abusive relationship, how do you explain your absence from the house? How can you afford in your household on the money to pay for the services that you may desperately need? And that's some of what we were hearing from Molly Hennessy-Fisk, is that women simply could not spend the time and the money again to have another go at this, especially as the services they needed were getting farther and farther away from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're fortunate here in California. Our governor, as you mentioned earlier, our governor, our legislature have, and the West really in general have stepped up to make sure that women can get the services that they need, and that's backed up by money, which is really important. I think Planned Parenthood, particularly out here, is particularly, fortunate that there's a pretty powerful abortion fund in this state, where people are, these agencies are mostly surviving off of donations. Clearly, our population is pretty energized about this issue. Donors, I would imagine, will be following with that. And we've also seen today a number of corporations that have stepped up and promised to, help their employees get, the services they need, and in some cases travel. But again, that leaves a lot of the people who are the most neediest who won't get that care. And so the challenge is going to be not just getting, the people who are available, but also finding the other people that really need help and aren't necessarily like at top of mind.
So the Roe ruling today may be the end of one part of the story, but it's certainly the opening of a number of other chapters and the consequences of this.
Absolutely. That's what I'm hearing.
Erika Smith's column will be in the Sunday LA Times. You can read it at latimes.com. You can also follow her on Twitter. I think it's Erika K. Smith. Is that right?
ERIKA_D_Smith.
All right, that's where you can find her. And Erika, thank you for taking the time today to talk about what it is that you have found that already metaphorical bridges that have been more or less in effect before are now really being strengthened and tightened in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling on Roe today. Erika, thanks so much as always.
Thanks, Pat, for having me on.
We'll be back at the top of the hour to finish up with our Supreme Court reporter, David Savage, who's been covering the Supreme Court longer than many of the justices have been on it, to talk about the legal repercussions, whether the ruling today says, okay, you can't base a right to abortion on a privacy decision, but are there other options in the Constitution for you to do this, or is that door effectively slammed shut? And what other constitutional rights that have been in effect for a long time may also now be thrown out in the wake of this ruling? So come back and join us at the top of the hour. I'm Pat Morrison for the LA Times.